Hi, I'm Ted Haftegabber, founder and producer of Live Talks Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us. Since we started over a decade ago, we have brought you hundreds of conversations with storytellers, writers, actors, musicians, humorists, chefs, and thought leaders in business and science. You can watch and hear most of these in our YouTube channel and our podcast. For details, visit livetalksla.org. And now, here's the show you've tuned in to see.
So I want to say I remember when Food Lab came out, the book, but I mean...
Me too.
Yeah. And I remember like what a revelation it was for me and for a lot of people, I think, and just, I don't know, I just remember it sort of taking the place on my shelf as like, I don't know, like my new version of joy of cooking or whatever.
Cool.
And I think like we were all waiting for the second book, like what's the second book gonna be? And I remember like when I heard it was The Walk, like my first reaction was like, oh, that's kind of like I was a little surprised. But then I sort of realized, oh, like, yeah, The Walk, like, yes, like this is just like the Food Lab, this is the book I want, I need, like right now. Like I'm excited for this. Like how, like how'd The Walk, like how did you decide that this was gonna be the follow-up?
So I was going to do a Food Lab Volume 2. So when I wrote the Food Lab, I think you were like the first person that interviewed me after I wrote that, by the way.
The podcast?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah, at least one of the very first people.
And we talked mostly about the Beatles, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, like
we can do that tonight also.
if there's time.
So when I wrote the Food Lab, it was originally like much longer. It was 1,600 pages and was going to be a 2-volume set, and so then we cut it down to 1. But part of that was, so in the beginning of the Food Lab, there's this 2 pages where I talk about how much I love my wok and all the things you can do in a wok, and why everybody should have a wok and how it's the most versatile and useful pan in your kitchen. Then there's nothing else about it in the rest of the book.
No wok recipes.
No wok
at
recipes.
all.
Yeah, and it was because the whole wok chapter got removed along with a bunch of other stuff. But so then when I started writing the second volume of the Food Lab, it was random things. It was like tacos and pizza and a wok chapter. It was just like a bunch of things that I didn't know how to fit into a single book. So I was like, all right, I'll just start writing somewhere. And the wok chapter was sort of the obvious place for me to start because woks are great and I cook them. I use mine all the time. And so I started writing that chapter and I got expanding on what I originally had, and I was like a couple hundred pages in and still hadn't really even finished talking about like stir fry, right? And so there's all this other stuff you can do in a wok that I hadn't really written about yet. So yeah, so I called my editor and I was like, let's just write a book about the wok. It's like mostly done already, like it was in my it was in my head, because like I cook with a wok so frequently and have been cooking with a wok for such a huge part of my life. So it was actually, compared to the first book, relatively easy because the recipes in here are a lot more sort of personal to me and familiar to me. And, like I don't make meatloaf at home, really. Sometimes.
This is soul crushing for all of us who like have used your meatloaf recipe a million times. So wait, does this mean you have like a bunch of other like cutting room floor books? Like is there going to be a pizza? Like,
it's probably not going to be.
Your publisher told me to ask that. They are wondering how many. That's actually not a joke. That was on the recommended questions from the publisher.
I'm not doing.
What other books do you have coming?
My next projects, I'm going to be working on some more children's books, kids books, and then Cookbook-wise, I've been thinking of doing a book, not a kid's cookbook, but a book aimed at parents who want to get their kids involved in cooking.
I am also going to need that book. Yeah, I mean, like, do you feel like the walk is something that, as a dad, that you use a lot more? Is that like a big...
I wouldn't say I use it a lot more. I mean, so, you know, the walk in the book, like all the photos in here are of a walk that I got when I was in college, right? So like 20-something years ago. And so that exact same walk, I mean, like I used it when I was in college. I used it when I was living, you know, with roommates. I used it when it was just my wife and I. And yeah, so now I use it for our family. But it's, no, you know, most of the recipes in this book, virtually all of them, like there's no instruction in this book that tells you to preheat your oven at any point. I think maybe there's one, but you know, almost every recipe in this book is just a single pan on the stovetop. And for me, you know, that's sort of like an easy way that I've been cooking my whole life, and it's something. It's, you know, it's adaptable to a wide range of situations. So you can work with whatever you have in your fridge, and you can make like 1 or 2 dishes if it's just for you and another person, or you can make 4 dishes if it's for you and like a big family or friends coming over. You know, so it's and you kind of just do it all in succession. So it's just a pan that makes it really easy to cook every day.
You know what? I feel like this is. I feel like this is a good time to bring out.
Everybody already bought the book, I think.
To bring out.
I don't have to sell it. Right?
Hearing you talk about the walk you've had.
Okay.
I don't want to say this is a gift. I didn't bring you a gift because
Okay.
I'm not giving it to you.
Yeah.
But I brought something for you, kind of. I brought my walk.
Okay.
That I've had for 10 years.
All right.
And I'm very
respectable.
like.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people, I'm nervous that I don't use it right, and I'm sort of like. I was hoping maybe you'd take a look at it and tell me.
Tell you if you've been using it right?
Like, tell me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this out. They don't make bags for walks, by the way.
Yeah.
That's an idea. That's an idea.
I have the cooking setup that we're going to use later.
I try to get this out.
I have like a briefcase that opens up and you can pull a wok in an induction burner.
Very
and a bunch of
nervous
sauce
about
and
this
stuff.
because I've used it a long time. I want to know what you can glean from this. From like looking.
It looks good. It looks like you could probably
Just
wipe a little more oil out of it.
Don't listen.
But if you're going to use this every day, that's fine. But I wouldn't store it with that much oil on it. Like it'll start being sticky.
About 6 months after I got this wok, I took a wok cooking class from Jet Tila, who's a great chef from here in Los Angeles, and now people know him from TV and everything. And I went to a wok cooking class, and I brought my wok, and I kept it in the car. And then after the class, I was like, "Can I show you my wok? I don't think I did it right." And he was so nice. He was so nice about it. He's like, "Oh, this looks great." But I think he's just a really nice person.
I think it looks
great. And I want you to be honest.
We can cook in it later. I mean, I think this should fit the...
So talk about it. I mean, the whole beginning of the book is all about sort of how to... I mean, what kind of wok is this, first of all? Because I don't
So it's
think
like
I
the
know
northern
what this
Chinese
is made
style
of.
that has the long handle.
But it's made of... This is a carbon steel.
This is carbon steel,
okay.
yeah, which is the material that I would recommend for a wok because it... So, you know, carbon steel and cast iron, they'll both get black oxide and they'll start to get some polymer, you know, some seasoning built up on them. But there's a flavor that you get out of carbon steel or cast iron that's seasoned that you don't get out of like nonstick or stainless steel. If you just cook the exact same thing side by side and it just tastes different. So there's like a distinct flavor you get from the metal itself. But carbon steel is great because, well, it's like indestructible, right? As long as it's thick enough, which this one is. I think this is probably like...
Thank God.
16 gauge, so like 1.5 millimeter, 1.55 millimeters, I think, something like that. I would say this is about the size I would recommend for, I think this is probably what, 13 or 14 inches, which is what I would recommend for an average household. It's all metal, which is great because you can some woks that have the wooden handles or a polymer handle, you can season them over gas, but it becomes difficult to season them over electric because that.
Are there people here who don't know what seasoning is and like how to season a wok? I mean, should we talk about that?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. So seasoning. Okay. So there's a difference when someone talks about seasoning a wok. It's not exactly the same as when you're seasoning like a Western cast iron skillet or carbon steel skillet. So with a cast iron skillet, you're often, you're searing things in it. You're going to be heating it up slowly, but you're not going to go. You're not doing what you're doing in a wok, which is where you're very rapidly heating it, rapidly cooling it, deglazing it with liquids, and so like you're introducing a lot of stress when you cook in a wok, and so that makes it really difficult to build up like a thick layer of the actual sort of polymers. The polymer. When you heat up oil, it breaks down and it polymerizes and it forms layers of seasoning on a Western style skillet. So a cast iron pan, as you use it, the more you use it, it'll get this sort of thicker and thicker layer of nonstick coating. With a wok, that's not going to happen. So you can see on yours, there's no layer of seasoning polymers on the bottom, and that's fine. Yeah, with a wok, it's more of sort of like a per use thing. So at the very beginning, you season it, it'll be shiny metal. It'll be probably covered in some kind of manufacturer's coating. So you heat it up and scrub it out. And then you heat it again until it's basically black all over, and that's sort of like all the seasoning you really need to do on a wok to start cooking with it. And then from then, when like a Chinese chef talks about the seasoning process of a wok, they're more talking about the way you properly heat it, preheat it, and the way you add the oil to it each time you cook with it. But a wok, you should be able to scrub out that initial coating, get the whole thing black, and then like fry an egg in it.
So wait, what's the proper way to cook? Wait, so you just said, like, how do you add the oil, and what's the proper way to heat it up, and all of that? Tell me all of that.
So virtually every time you cook with it, you're going to heat it up till it starts like smoking. So yours already has a little layer of oil in it, probably more than I would have left there. But yours has a layer of oil in it. So if you put this on a stovetop right now and heat it up, it's going to start smoking. If you're really careful about like wiping out your wok, then it might not smoke every time you do it. So what I typically recommend in the book is to rub a small layer of oil into your wok with a paper towel and then heat that up. So that way it sort of gives you a temperature indicator of when to start cooking, or when to add the rest of your oil. And then right before you start cooking, you add the rest of the oil around the outside, and then pretty much immediately start cooking. What you don't want to do is add your cooking oil, and then let it smoke heavily, so that it builds up bad flavor when you start doing that. So you want to add the oil and then immediately start cooking with it.
And then, so at the end, so after I finish cooking, I usually go to the sink, wash it out with water, not really soap, but like a sponge, like just wash it out a little bit. I don't think I use soap usually.
So soap is fine, yeah.
The soap's okay?
Soap's okay, yeah.
Yeah?
If you need it, yeah. I use like what's it called, a bamboo brush, because it has these it has like stiff tips, so it makes it really easy to, if there's anything stuck at all, like you just kind of scrape it around like that. But a sponge is okay also.
And then I usually dry it out.
Yeah. And
then put a little oil in, wipe it around. But I put too much?
I'm just joking. So if you were like going to not use this for the next 2 months or so, then there.
Kenji, I use my wok all the time.
It looks
Don't
like
insult
it, yeah.
me.
So, but if you weren't, then this would get kind of sticky, and you'd have to scrub it out before you used it. But as long as you're using it regularly, that amount of oil.
Right.
It just, Can everyone see how much oil is in here?
So should we, I guess we skip the middle part, which is probably the most important part.
What's the middle part?
The cooking, what you do in the.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I mean, should we talk about wok? Like,
we can talk about that, yeah. Is that what you want to talk about?
Yeah, what I want to know, I mean. Tell me about wok.
Okay. So wok is it depends who you ask what people
I can take that back, by the way. You don't have to hold that for the whole thing, or do you like it, or you're?
No, I'm good. So my dad, who is from Western Pennsylvania, when we were growing up in New York and Boston, he would take us all around, like going to every Chinese restaurant was his thing. For him, anytime we had a beef chow fan that was well made, he would always say, I like this one. It has that nice smoky flavor, right? And so that, so to me, that flavor, that nice smoky flavor, is what I associate with wok. But for some people, it's what we were talking about backstage a little bit. How there's this concept of home cooking and restaurant cooking, right? And wok is for most people is you know, especially people from China who you talked about, it's like a restaurant thing. It's not something you would expect from home cooking because it has to do with like the really high heat of a restaurant burner, the atmosphere, like you know, some people describe it as like I think of it as like the Chili's effect, you know, with the fajita platter that goes through the restaurant.
Chili's like Chili's,
yeah,
like the chain.
Yeah, you know, they invented that like sizzling fajita platter that gets other people to order. But
yes, I do. I'm not going to pretend like I don't know what that is.
The sizzling fajita platter, right? That's like a uniquely restaurant experience that you wouldn't expect to do at home, right? And so, you know, so for a long time, my idea of what you were trying to do in a wok when you're stir frying was really colored by this fact that most of my like Chinese food experience was from eating out in Chinese restaurants, right? And mostly sort of Southern Chinese influenced restaurants, or New York, you know, or like New York Chinese food, where that flavor is a really sort of prominent element, you know. And so I always had this idea that like, well, you can't really stir fry in a wok. Like when you're stir frying in a wok, your goal is to try and imitate those restaurants, right? But of course, that's a kind of silly way to think of it, right? Because there are most people who cook in a wok every day aren't cooking on a restaurant burner. They're not cooking restaurant-style food.
Are you saying that, are there tips in this book about how you can achieve those? Because,
yeah,
I mean, I have...
Okay,
like,
so there's two things.
Like, my stove at home is 15,000 BTUs,
right.
Which I was like, that's a lot. Isn't that a lot? I mean, what's a typical wok burner in a restaurant?
Like 150,000? So, like 10 times as much.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, but so there's a couple things. So there are tips in the book on how you can sort of achieve those flavors at home. You know, the easiest way is to use an outdoor burner that specifically has, you know, really high heat output. But there's other tips in the book for how to get that thing. So like using a kitchen torch to bring fire into the wok, things like that. But I think really, you know, the idea of wok hei, and that smoky flavor in particular, like I think a lot of what I try and do in this book is sort of reset that expectation that that's what every stir fry is supposed to be. So like, you know, there are times when it is appropriate and where it is what you're after, but like you don't need it when you're making like scrambled eggs with tomatoes, right?
Right. I love hearing the story about your dad because that was my childhood experience. Was my dad took us to like Chinatown and all like that. Like when we visited New York, we would like walk around Chinatown. He took me all my like seminal like food experiences, and one of the places we'd eat out all the time was a mall food court, which at the time this was like Panda Express wasn't like in Miami or whatever. The Chinese food restaurant at our mall food court there was a guy with a wok that was basically at the front of the restaurant. Like you could see him, he made everything. Like anything you ordered that came out of the wok, like he was there making it. And I distinctly remember even as like 10, 11, 12 years old, sitting there watching him. And like, first of all, his wok arm, very strong.
Yeah.
Like you could tell he had two different size arms.
Yeah.
The one that held the wok was like, but the other thing was seeing he had all these little crocs to the side of the wok that had all the stuff.
Yeah.
That like as a kid, I didn't know. I mean, now I look back and I'm like, all right, there was definitely soy sauce, sugar, salt, MSG,
chicken powder.
You know, probably rice wine and oyster sauce, and watching the like dance of like vegetables in first, like, and I feel like that's like in the book you have a whole thing about, and reading it reminded me like of that guy and like watching him do, you know, what he did. It was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the book definitely talks about that, and you know, the thing I tried to do in all the recipes where you're going to be sort of cooking really quick and adding things in quick succession. For all those recipes, it says like, you know, before you start cooking, these are the bowls that you should have, what should be in each one, and so basically like it tells you how to set up a little station so that you're ready to start cooking, and that you're not like kind of scrambling back to the cutting board when you realize like, oh, I forgot the ginger or whatever. So even more than with sort of Western cuisine, the idea of like mise en place, just having stuff ready, is important. You know, what you're talking about as far as like, you know, the chef having all these bowls of condiments and stuff ready, I think that really sort of accentuates a lot of the difference between typical, a lot of typical Western cuisines, particularly like French cuisine and everything that comes from French cuisine and more sort of East Asian cuisines, where when you think about like French food, what you're doing is you take like a chicken, right, and then you cut the carcass out and you roast it, and then you make a stock with that carcass, and then you strain it and you reduce it, and then you serve like this reduced chicken stuff with like the braised thigh meat or something, right? So you're basically like taking one ingredient and really sort of concentrating and reducing flavors, and I think that's what a lot of sort of French and a lot of Western European cuisines base flavor development on, and sort of the concentration of umami and all these things, whereas with a lot of East Asian cuisines, the protein or the vegetables cook pretty quickly. Like with Japanese food, like you're often like steaming it very briefly or simmering it, or maybe you're grilling it. Instead you're using these condiments and sauces that are fermented for a really long time, or are already in a really reduced and sort of flavorful form. So it's just it's interesting to me the way you develop flavors from different ways. Like everybody loves meaty umami flavors, sure, but like you can get that. You can get there in different ways, and that's why food is different around the world.
All right. So should we talk about fried rice? Fried rice?
Yeah, if that's what you want to talk. Yeah, I'm here to talk about whatever you want.
I'm just going off the book. Like,
okay.
There's obviously a whole fried rice or a rice section, a rice section. So fried rice. Day-old fried rice. Always?
Not always. So what you really need is dry rice, right? And so an easy way to get that is use day-old rice. Let it, especially like if you spread it out and leave it open in your fridge, like that's a great way to get there. But you can make fried rice perfectly well with fresh rice as long as like you cook it and then you spread it out on a tray so that it evaporates off and it dries relatively efficiently. So you can make fried rice with completely fresh rice. What is difficult to use for fried rice is if you have rice that's like left over from a meal and you don't let it completely dry out and go stale before using it. So like 4-hour-old to 12-hour-old rice is not great for fried rice, but other than that, you're pretty good.
Okay, so I know you lived on the fried rice thing.
Yeah.
I know you're from Boston.
Yeah.
Right? And I have a question. I hope there's somebody here who also wants to know the answer to this, so I'm not just asking for myself. But the fried rice, like Americanized Chinese food fried rice from the East Coast, always so dark. Like it's really dark, like compared to, like it has this like, it's
especially in Boston, I think they like food browner
so
in
what,
Boston.
But how do they get the fried, because I feel like that's the way like New York fried rice, like in Miami where I grew up, it was like on the East Coast, there is this version of Americanized fried rice that is darker, and it's like, it's not from adding soy sauce, because if you add too much soy sauce, it makes it salty, and do you have any idea how they do that?
I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but my guess would be, my guess would be maybe some, I mean, it could be like Maggi seasoning, some kind of yeast-based.
If you don't know, then nobody knows.
Product. I don't know.
That's my feeling.
I don't know. Yeah.
All right, noodles. Noodles is another chapter in the book.
Yeah.
What's
you want to talk about noodles?
What's your favorite? You have a favorite noodle dish in the book?
A favorite noodle dish in the book. Yeah. So there's this recipe in there for these cold-dressed Sichuan noodles. So you basically it's noodles dressed in like vinegar and like a chili sauce that you make. And that dish, my friend Jimmy, son, back when everybody was having babies, all my friend group at least, we were all having babies at the same time. And so I would just call these the baby shower noodles because he would always bring the noodle dish to every baby shower. And he would, he brought the sauces and stuff separately, and had the noodles that were chilled, and then mixed it. And then he always hid like a backup bag of noodles under the gift table because he knew that they would go fast. So those, I don't know if those are my favorite noodle recipe in the book, but that's what I thought of when you asked.
What's the wok part of that? If it's cold noodles. Tell me about this. Tell me about this.
So, I mean, so there are some sort of wok-adjacent recipes in here also. It was one of those things where it's like, I'm writing this whole chapter on noodles, like how to stir-fry noodles. There's a bunch of like sauces you can make for noodles. And so it's like, if I'm writing about that, like why would I not also just include a couple of like
your friend
cold-dressed
Jimmy's noodles
yeah, my
that
friend
you
Jimmy's noodles.
brought to your baby shower?
Yeah, you make the chili oil in the wok actually, so that's
nice.
Yeah.
And
you can boil the noodles in the wok if you so choose.
Actually, you also write about the Vietnamese garlic noodles, which are really well known in here in LA because of the restaurant Crustacean. Yeah,
same
but
family.
I didn't realize that family started in San Francisco before.
Yeah, in the Outer Sunset. Helene An's family. So the restaurant in San Francisco is Ten Long, and it's been there since 1971, I think is when it opened. But they invented this garlic noodle dish that it's served with roasted crab mostly when you get. I don't know if that's how it's done here. Is that how it's done at Crustacean here?
It's been so long. So I'm embarrassed. It's been so long since I've had it. I don't
but
even remember.
it's a noodle dish that's made with. It's like a cross between Italian aglio olio and and then a bunch of Vietnamese flavors. So it's got fish sauce and Parmesan and garlic and butter and oyster sauce, and it's really tasty. Yeah, it's good.
So having written the book, can you guess what the next thing I want to talk about is?
Braising and simmering and.
Sure. Is that what you want to talk about?
Those are things you can do in a wok.
Actually, the correct answer was eggs. Eggs was the correct answer in big letters.
Oh, okay.
I love that. I mean, eggs was like that was your first big serious eats thing, right? Like
first Food Lab article was about boiled eggs.
And then obviously it was a big chapter in
the
Food
book.
Lab.
Yeah.
And yet you still found more. There's more egg stuff in here. What's the?
There's a lot of egg stuff in here. Because eggs are. I feel like even more than with sort of Western style eggs, like the range of textures you get out of eggs cooked in a wok are. I mean, there's like a mind-numbing array of textures you get out of it. So like everything from like egg drop soup, right? Like that sort of silky texture that you get. Or there's a recipe for slippery eggs with beef in there, which is it's like a stir-fried beef dish that then gets this really soupy, brothy egg mixture. Or shrimp with lobster sauce, which is like a New England thing, right? And that's a sauce that's in New England, it's brown, and it's thickened with eggs.
Is it really in New England? It's brown?
Yeah, often, not always. But.
In Miami, it was white.
Yeah.
It was shrimp with it wasn't until years later that I realized, because shrimp and lobster sauce doesn't actually have lobster in it.
No.
It was so confusing as a child. You want me to explain why it's called that, or
I wrote about it.
You don't want to tell people what's in the book because you're afraid.
No, I don't remember.
They all already bought the book. You can.
So they can read about it. I would have to open up the book and read it.
Should I tell everyone about how my grandma Della choked on shrimp and lobster sauce when I was a kid? It was very traumatic.
Yeah.
I never ate it. I don't think people want to hear that.
Now I do. Is this true?
So it sounds like it's funny. It is true. That is true. Yes. I feel like the book is. Do you feel like is this a completely different book than the Food Lab? Like in the sense of how you approached it? Like were these recipes like test? I mean, it sounds like this is, I want to say more casual book, but it feels like this is more like. You don't seem as insane about this stuff as you did about your first book, is what I'm saying.
It's different. I mean, there's definitely a lot of sort of Food Lab-ish stuff because, I think mainly it's in the more the focus on technique as opposed to just recipes. So the ratio of like writing about technique to recipes is about the same as it was in the Food Lab, which I think is sort of. Yeah, probably what makes it most similar, but certainly like these recipes are ones that I cook a lot more regularly at home than most of the, like I don't yeah, I don't make chili that takes 4 days to make at home on a regular basis. But you know, I think it's also sort of more reflective of just where I am personally in my life right now, which is yeah, trying to spend more time with my family.
Yeah, exactly.
Spend more time with my family. Not obsessed.
It's hard for me to say it too. Talk
like
about my
4 in the
kids in
morning.
that way.
Yeah.
Do your kids have a favorite dish in the book? Are there certain things in here?
Yeah, actually, the one that we're going to make later. So the Japanese mapo tofu, which is a dish that I grew up eating. So my mom, and we can talk about it when we're cooking. But mapo tofu is a Sichuan dish, but it was brought to Japan in the 70s and sort of developed into its own style there. And so we're going to cook that later. But that's also the recipe that I make for like my daughter. If there's a day when I'm like, what am I going to make for dinner? And I can't think of anything, then like I always have the ingredients for that, and I know like 100% of the time I make it, she's going to eat it.
It's important.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there a recipe in the book that you really want people to make but don't think they will? Like, is there like you know what I'm saying? Like, is there like a favorite thing that you're like, I really hope that people like try this one or discover this one?
I mean, probably that one, because I think a lot of people are going to make so there's 2 recipes for mapo tofu in the book, and I think a lot of people are going to make the Sichuan one, the more traditional one, and fewer people will make the Japanese one, but I encourage you to try both.
Was there like a particular recipe or technique that you struggled to sort of unlock? Was there anything in the book that like took a long time, or like you really like focused on there's a lot about getting wok hei, in particular about beef chow fun, which is like my family's favorite dish anywhere. So yeah, a lot of work went into that and figuring out how you can get that flavor, like even with an electric stove or even with an induction cooktop, and a lot about like working on the meat and getting that proper I did want to ask you about that.
Chinese restaurant texture.
Yeah, so tell us about that. There's a lot about there's the what's it called, the like velveting of the meat, which I know is, but then there's also the massaging, which I didn't know about.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So yeah, if you're trying to get that super sort of tender texture that you get at like even the cheapest place that sells beef chow fun has beef that's really tender. It's like 90% of that is basically washing it. So you put it in a bowl of water and you just scrub it like you're cleaning clothes. And just doing that is going to make it super tender. And then the other thing that you do is marinate it with an alkaline ingredient. So it can be baking soda. It could be sodium carbonate, like baked baking soda, sodium carbonate, or it can just be egg whites, which are also alkaline. And so yeah, that combination of massaging and then brining with an alkaline ingredient is what gives it that texture.
All right, let's see. Is it almost time to cook yet, or think? I mean, we did the massaging. You want to show us the massaging again? Is it time to cook? Can we cook? Let's do it.
Yeah. Can everyone see what's going on?
Don't look at me
Is the
anymore.
angle all right? Okay, so what we're cooking, we're going to do, this is my mom's version of Japanese-style mapo tofu. So as we were talking about before, mapo tofu is a Sichuan dish, and it has the sort of typical mala flavor profile, so the numbing and hot flavor profile. In the Japanese version, and so that comes from the combination of Sichuan peppercorns, which give you that numbing effect, and doubanjiang, which is a spicy like bean, a fermented broad bean and chili paste. Do you want to?
I was seeing if standing over here made that sound stop. Nope.
Oh, yeah, it's still going, huh? Okay, so I've got some scallions. We're going to do, let's see if this works.
How many BTUs this thing get up to?
It's 1,800 watts. So I don't know what that translates to.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either.
Yeah. It gets plenty hot though. But also, this is one of those dishes where you don't need sort of like crazy high heat for it to work. Yeah. So my mom. We lived in Morningside Heights, which was 125th and Riverside, and at the time when I was growing up, that was a sort of meat packing area. So it was all butchers, and so my mom would buy meat from a guy who sold it to her at the traffic light. Like he would come by with a cooler that had steaks and ground beef in it, and so she would buy the ground beef from this guy. Ooh, that does get hot, huh? A little too hot for now. All right. So she would buy ground beef from this guy, and then some of it would turn into sort of Italian-American style meat sauce, and then some of it would turn into dumpling fillings. And so that actually that recipe's in the book also. But folding once a month or so, or once every other month, me and my sisters, my mom would sort of sit us down in front of the TV, and then give us dumpling filling and dumpling wrappers. And our job. Does this remind you of your
child? Do you want me to do something? I can do something if you want.
Okay, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
need
Here,
to. I don't
here.
want to mess it up.
No, you can start cooking some stuff.
Oh,
okay?
really? I probably can chop better.
Yeah. No, here. All right, so we got garlic, ginger, scallions. Here's some oil.
Why don't I cut? You want me to cut? I can cut that. I can. No. You cook. No, don't be crazy. Don't be crazy. I can cut ginger. No, I want you to show. I also because the book goes into how you. Because I don't know if I actually hold my wok right. I don't know what this motion is, but this is.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can do that. That's
okay. Do you want to chop up this rest of this ginger? Okay, go ahead.
I don't know. How did you do it? That's how you want it?
Just chop it up into pieces.
I've bit off more
I can
than
show
I
you.
can chew.
I can show you how I want it. So we'll just chop it. This is kind of young ginger, so I just leave the skin on. If it was kind of more leathery ginger, I would take the skin off, but I usually don't bother. Okay, so we got our. Thank you. All right.
You forgot the for nothing.
Yeah. Oops. Now what's it done? Okay. So this is like a relatively relaxed stir fry. So this dish is, it's a braised dish. So you start out by stir frying, by building a sort of flavorful oil base, and then you add some liquids, and then you let it really briefly simmer. So a lot of dishes that I refer to as braised, that you do in a wok, it's different from a Western style braise where you're simmering in the oven for 3 hours. But because of the sorry, we're supposed to talk about.
Well, there's the first chapter of the book is about stir frying.
Right.
But this is not. This dish is not a stir fry.
This is So this part. I am literally stirring and frying, but typically when you're talking about stir frying, you're really talking more about a toss fry, and that's where essentially you start with the pan tilted away from you, you push it forward, and then as it gets to the back, you tilt it backwards, and then you kind of jerk it, and it makes the food do that that thing. So that's sort of the essential motion of a stir fry. The reason you do that because again I'll compare it to some Western cooking techniques, but with a lot of Western food you're going for that Maillard reaction, where you're trying to sear things or put color on a steak or sear your chunks of chicken or whatever it is you're doing. That's not often a goal when you're stir frying or when you're cooking in a wok. Again, a lot of the flavor, rather than coming from those sort of browning reactions, they're coming from seasoning and aromatics that you're adding. So the goal of a stir fry is much more about getting food in the air so that it steams and so that the moisture comes off of it, right? Because what you don't want in a stir fry, and this is again is not really this one is more of a braise, but what you don't want in a stir fry is for the liquid to start settling at the bottom and your food ends up kind of simmering instead of cooking quickly. Okay, so far, beef, garlic, ginger, scallions. And now in a, in the Sichuan version of this dish, you would first of all start off with more oil, and then you would also flavor it with Sichuan peppercorns and chilies. And then at that point, you would add the doubanjiang, the fermented bean paste, and sort of cook it out until the oil turns red. And that, that's where that flavor and color in that dish comes from. For this one, so this is a mixture of shoyu, mirin, and sake. So like the sort of 3 Japanese seasonings. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of a cornstarch.
I can do that, actually.
Go for it.
Yeah. Look at this. I'm doing something. I wouldn't have thought that you could hear sarcasm and clapping, but I'm wrong. You can definitely hear it.
And then this is a firm silken tofu, which, what I've found, depending on where you get your tofu from, but oftentimes on labeling, like silken and soft are conflated.
Right.
Like people, the range of hardnesses you get are like extra firm, medium, soft, silken. Whereas really silken is just a different style of tofu. So this is firm silken tofu. It always reminds me of when people talk about like 00 pizza flour, and the 00 is a reference to the milling size, but people conflate it with the flour being
from Italy.
Softer. Well, from Italy, sure, but also like lower protein content. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I know some of the words you're saying.
So we used to call this mapo gorp growing up because when you get the texture right, the texture is gorpy. All right, and so we're just gonna let that simmer down a little bit, and then we'll eat it.
All right, I can definitely do that.
So yeah, with the depending on, this is the way my mom used to make it. A lot of Japanese recipes for this will call for adding miso to it, or sometimes a little bit of like a spicy chili paste. If you want it spicy, I have chili oil that I made earlier.
Cool.
All right.
This isn't about me. Whatever you want. Is that for garnish? I can do that.
You want to cut a little bit for garnish? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I'm gonna redeem myself. Also, you need some usable video from my GoPro that I forgot was on my head until just a second ago. They're trying to decide whether to sarcastically clap again or not. I can hear it.
I did last night. I was with Dan Pashman, from the Sporkful, and he reminded me that once we once recorded this episode of the Sporkful about like sounds in cooking and how you can tell things by the sound they make. And one of the examples we used was how you can tell if someone's cutting scallions incorrectly.
Oh, no.
Because it has like a shh, as opposed to like a slice, you're crushing them instead of slicing them. They look great though.
I'll have you know I made dinner for my family before coming here. It was delicious. They loved it.
What'd you make?
I made chicken cutlets, breaded chicken cutlets, and roasted cabbage in the oven. Delicious.
That sounds
easy.
Really good. Yeah.
I liked it. I didn't have to cut scallions or use my incorrectly seasoned wok. So it turned out fine.
So yeah, this is my mom's we don't have any serving platters, but this plus dumplings and rice with furikake was like my favorite meal growing up. Does it look
I mean,
appropriately gorpy?
I mean, it actually looks pretty awesome. I feel like this is something that my kids might actually eat, as opposed to like the Sichuan style of mapo tofu that I don't think I could.
My daughter goes through phases, like sometimes she loves spicy food and then sometimes she's not in the mood. Do you want chili oil on it?
Sure, go for it.
Okay.
I can't, there's no spoons?
No.
I'm definitely not eating that with chopsticks. Like that's like a trap. You're gonna feed me?
Good?
Yeah. I wasn't gonna say no. That's by the way another bucket list thing now. Checked off.
Me too. Feeding you. I think that's all we're doing with this.
Amazing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, wait, yeah.
What? How do you?
I say guys, gals, and non-binary
Look what
pals.
you're doing.
Bye-bye.
Do you see what you're doing? Like this is fine. This is fine. People want to look at this.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thanks for doing that.
I think we're going to open it up to questions from you guys. I'm sure you have a lot.
All right, first question. Sorry to be extremely technical, but in your opinion, what is the San Francisco treat?
I don't think it's a matter of opinion, right?
No one cares about my answer to this.
Treat is?
What? Rice-A-Roni. Oh, what?
Rice-A-Roni is the
San
Francisco
What
treat.
what's the question? I didn't think I was going to have to do anything for this part.
I made a dumb joke, and so I had this video for these Vietnamese noodles, and I made a dumb joke in that video
about it being a San Francisco treat,
but not the San Francisco treat. And I repeated it many times, and I just thought this is this dumb thing I'm saying, and then the New York Times just published an excerpt from, and then I stuck it in the book because I was like, oh, that'll be fun to write in the book, and then the New York Times just excerpted it. So now that dumb joke that I just told on like the middle of a YouTube video, and it's not even a joke, right? It's just a dumb line, but now it's in the New York Times.
Sucks to be famous. I stopped listening after he said sorry to be too technical, and I was thinking in my head like, is there a way to be too technical asking you a question? I don't think so. I don't think that's possible.
All right, Kenji, what is an ingredient you have not cooked with but are intrigued by?
Stop looking at me. I don't have the answers.
I don't know. What have I not cooked with that I'm intrigued by? Ostrich eggs. Those are intriguing. Yeah, I've always wanted to
That's the big one that you have to saw open?
Yeah, or you get a special hammer or something. I don't know. But yeah, there's an ostrich farm in Colombia near where Audrey, my wife, lives that we've visited a few times, and I've eaten a lot of ostrich, but I've never cooked their eggs, and you can buy the eggs there, and I've always thought to myself, I should buy an egg, but then I was like, what if it's gross? And then I have like 70 eggs worth of gross egg to eat.
I feel like that was like a old school Iron Chef ingredient, and those guys always made amazing things out of those eggs.
I mean, it was on TV, though, so they could have been gross.
In most of your videos, you take your plate or food over to your door and eat it there. Why? Is it a lighting thing?
I was not expecting all these technical questions.
What did you say?
It was, why do I eat by my door in my videos? So this is in old videos when I lived in San Mateo. In my new home, I don't eat by the door, I eat by the dining room window. But it was... it was a light thing, I guess. I don't know. It was a thing.
They're just all jokes. All the questions are jokes.
It was just I thought it was a thing I did a couple times, and then people mentioned it, so I was like, oh, I guess that's my thing. Eating by the window is my thing, so I do it. It's like It's like why does Mr. Rogers change his sweater in every episode, right? Why? Does he need to? No, but it's his thing. Right?
What's a dish you love cooking in a wok that is traditionally not meant to be cooked in a wok? Maybe it's even better when it's cooked in a wok.
So making stock in a wok, and this is like whether it's like the stocks in this book or like a Western style stock, I find it's really easy in a wok because you can. So like if I buy a chicken, right, and I have the carcass, if I want to do it like if I want to make a dark chicken stock, the way I learned in like a restaurant, you would put it on a tray and you'd roast it. You'd like smear it with tomato paste, whatever, roast it, and then you'd deglaze that pan. What I do now is I just chop it all, hack it all up, and stir fry it to get it brown all over, and stir fry like all the aromatics and whatever, and then just pour the water in. And, it's a lot easier to brown, to brown things in a wok, I think, because you have all that surface area for doing it. And then it also is easier to reduce the stock at the end because you have such good evaporation in the wok.
You know what's a thing you wouldn't think to make in a wok that you shouldn't make in a wok? Hibiscus tea.
Okay.
Like Jamaica. Found that out the hard way.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
What happened? Bad for the wok or bad for the tea? Or
it's bad
both?
for, you should not, wok hay and Jamaica are not, don't go good together. It's a big mistake.
Why would you think to do that?
It wasn't, it was a matter of like having pans on the, like what pans I had on the stove. And I was just like, oh, I can just boil this in the wok. And it was not good.
Not good.
Not good.
What role have restaurants played in different stages of your life, growing up, while working in professional kitchens, and as a food writer? How do you think about restaurant food in relation to home cooking food?
That's a long question.
Well, let's start with the restaurants. What restaurants, are there like seminal restaurants like through your, that really, I think that's what the question was, right? The first part?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, so growing up, restaurant, it was Chinese and Mexican restaurants. So I'd say the most seminal restaurant of my childhood was, we used to go to this place in New York called, it was in the Elizabeth Street Mall called Phoenix Garden. And we went there when I was little, and they had the smokiest beef chow fun. And then the restaurant burned down. And they...
It's not funny. Not
and they
funny.
They opened Phoenix Garden 2 in Jersey, spelled T-O-O, and that one burned down.
Oh, come on.
And then they reopened in Midtown Manhattan, but they closed maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But it was the sons of the original owner.
And what was the one in Midtown called?
Phoenix Garden.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah. That's where I went growing up a lot.
Wait, you want to read, what was the rest of the question?
Restaurant, I mean, I cooked in restaurants, and I guess they had a big role in my life when they were paying my paycheck, and I was learning in them. And then
where did you cook in professionally? I don't know if I know that.
All in Boston. So and my first restaurant job was at a place called Fire and Ice, which was
oh my God, Fire and Ice!
Mongolian
I know
grill,
that place.
Yeah.
That was like a. It was all you can eat?
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
all you can eat. That's why I know it. It was, but what was the Fire and Ice part? What was the, like there was, it had to do with.
So there was a big round grill.
Was it a wok
no,
or
it
was
wasn't a wok. It was like a big cast iron.
It was like Mongolian barbecue,
exactly.
like.
Yeah, and so there was a buffet where you picked up like raw meat and whatever.
Right.
And then.
But the decor was like really fancy. It was like, well,
I mean,
not
fancy for like
but
college kids. Yeah.
It wasn't like the Mongolian barbecue places in LA that you would imagine that are like it was like a done up like it's almost, it felt like a chain like
there was a few locations. I started at my first restaurant job was as a prep cook, and then a week later I was promoted to Night of the Round Grill. But no, I worked for Barbara Lynch, so Number 9 Park and B&G Oysters and the Butcher Shop and those places, and then with Ken Oranger for a while, so Cleo and Uni, and those were like the formative restaurant experiences for me as far as professional life goes. And then I was completely out of restaurants for a long time until I opened my own, which was I would not recommend opening a restaurant or running like a giant food food business on Sundays.
You're talking about my job?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's another talk.
Yeah.
How terrible the restaurant business is.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that was like it was one of those things where it's like, I have this opportunity. I'm going to regret it I'll regret it when I'm older, like if I never, tried opening my own restaurant. So at least, been there, done that, don't want to do it again.
What was the second part of the question? Or did we get it? Are we moving on?
Yeah, let's move on. Do you have any advice for creating well-balanced fusion dishes? I was trying to create a Korean-Italian pasta the other day, and it came out too Italian. What would you?
Trick questions. These are really jokes, right?
What would you do in that situation?
I don't know. Make it less Italian and. I don't know. I mean, I think it's like any kind of cooking. It's like you.
Don't look at me. I didn't ask this question.
You have to, I don't know, practice. I don't really know how to answer that question. I really don't.
The question is crazy.
All right, how about this one? I think this one comes from somebody in the Chamber of Commerce. As I'm sure you're aware, the San Gabriel Valley has some of the best Asian food in the United States. Did you go to any of these restaurants in preparation for this cookbook?
So it's funny, Zach and I were just talking, I think, right when my first book came out, I was here with Ed Levine, and you and I and Ed and some other people.
Yeah, a bunch of people.
Yeah, went to Chang Taste.
Yeah.
And at the time, I wrote that was like the best Sichuan restaurant that I've been to in the U.S.
And I actually remember, it was funny when I saw you were going to make mapo tofu tonight.
Yeah.
It reminded me, I remember you sort of waxing poetic about their mapo tofu.
Yeah, it was really good.
Which I enjoyed listening to. How much you liked it, and I don't know, I remember you really liking it.
Yeah, I did. I mean, so, I didn't specifically go back to the San Gabriel Valley to research anything for this book, but I have had really good food in the San Gabriel. I mean, mostly thanks to you. I've had a lot of really good.
I do not want credit for that. That's
well, for introducing me to the people making
but I definitely, once you said you loved the mapo tofu, it gave me the confidence to recommend the mapo tofu there to other people.
And have you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. People don't need me to tell them that Chengdu Taste is great.
Yeah.
Next question, do you have a domed wok lid? I noticed from your YouTube videos that you have a flat wooden kind. Do you prefer that more, and why?
So I do have a domed lid, but I mainly switched over to using this flat wooden kind, which I got from, I can't remember, I got it online, but there's a company where you just measure the top of your wok, and then they make a lid and they send it to you. I prefer the wooden one mainly because it seats into the wok a little bit better. So there's like a domed metal lid, and I find that if it gets even a little bit warped, which it does, you get cracks in it, whereas the wooden one seats in really nicely, and because it's wood, it also expands to cover it, so you can get a better seal. I think wooden lids look nicer also. Yeah,
but you can use pretty much any. You can use any like lid pot, right? That as long as it fits inside the. All right, thank God.
All right, this question comes from a gentleman who says he's Indian, and it's important that I point that out. He says, you got an architecture degree from MIT. Did that upset your father?
No, my dad does not get upset by very much. He was, yeah, my dad was happy that I became a cook, but he probably would have also been happy if I was an architect. I wouldn't say he's supportive. He's just not unsupportive.
All right, cooking with a wok often leads to a messy and oily kitchen. What is the best way to keep my stove and kitchen clean? What is your kitchen cleaning routine like, Kenji?
So cooking in a wok can lead to those things. In particular, if you're trying to stir fry dishes that use really high heat, then it can lead to that. But there's a lot of dishes that don't. Like what we just made didn't have any splatter at all, really. My kitchen cook. So first of all, if you're going to make dishes that that are going to have like a lot of wok or cooking or you're going to be stir frying with a lot of high heat, then it's obviously best if you have a kitchen that has a vented a vented hood. I don't know what that's like in LA. Do most kitchens in LA have that?
I mean,
on the East Coast, it's mixed.
You mean like in your house?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I read that in the book, and we have a vent over, and it gets like super greasy. It has to be cleaned like all the time.
Taking the vent, the things. People who have vent hoods, the metal grate, you should be taking it out and washing.
I mean,
it
we needed one because my stove is 15,000 BTUs, so really important to have a hood for that kind of power.
But otherwise, it's like I cooked in this wok like when I was living in a 0-window apartment in Brooklyn, and for there we basically just opened up the door and had some room fans that blew out. So my advice is first of all, like, pick the recipes. Know what you're getting into before you start a recipe, because the ones that call for really high heat and a lot of tossing are probably going to be messier. And especially as you're practicing and getting better at the tossing without spilling, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. But my kitchen cleaning routine is that once a month or so I take out the grease traps from the hood and I clean them, and then each night I use Formula 409 on my stovetop, and I scrub it, and then I
At first I wasn't sure what this was. I didn't know what you were doing.
And then I wipe it with paper towels, and then I wash my hands, and I put the stove vents, the grates back on. I just clean it. I don't know, clean it. Right?
Listen, this is what people want to know. They want to imagine you cleaning in your kitchen.
It's more messy to make like a hamburger than it is to stir fry anything, I find, right? Or like sear a steak. That's messy.
A couple more questions. What are the three most, or what are some common mistakes amateur chefs make with the wok?
I don't know that there's necessarily I don't know that there's necessarily that many mistakes people make, but probably trying to cook too much at once. I remember when I was a kid, there was this series of infomercials. Like, I watched a lot of infomercials as a kid, but there was this series of infomercials called The Great Wok of China, and there's a very British dude tried to explain to you how to cook in a wok.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and he does it by like adding adding ingredients one at a time. And he's there talking for like 25 minutes, adding ingredients, and then he ends up with this like big simmering pile of like carrots and broccoli all cooked together. And so don't do it like that. Don't add all your ingredients at once. Cooking in batches, I think, is probably really the most important thing that I see people get wrong. Because the only way you can really mess stuff up is if you let the heat run out and things are kind of doing the stewing, as opposed to the stir frying.
And our final question, Kenji, a lady asks, if you were asked by the president to do a presidential dinner, what might that look like?
I would.
All jokes. They're all jokes.
I would decline as a stand against capitalism and our two-party government system. I would not want to cook for any president.
Wow. It's a really creative dodge to what I thought was a thoughtful question. We just want to know what you would cook for the president, Kenji.
It's the same when you're cooking for anybody. Like, you want to cook what's going to make them happy, right? Sometimes that's like cook whatever makes me happy and that makes them happy too. But I think you want to get a feel for what they like and then go from there. Thank you.